Representatives. Chairman Craven, welcome and good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thanks for taking the time to hear this bill. Why is this important is the first question I think I would ask if I was sitting in one of your chairs. Let me explain a little bit of the impact of the bill and then how it spreads out like if you dropped a rock in a pond and the disturbing of the water ripples out. Currently, it's approximately $930,000 value of an estate that upon your death, your executor or executrix and your accountant would have to pay Rhode Island estate tax. That exemption, as it's called, of $930,000, as it applies to the federal taxes, is $5 million. So you wouldn't have to pay any money until you reach $5 million with reference to your federal taxes. But if you get to approximately $930,001, then you go back and have to pay taxes, estate taxes, on the first dollar. So the exemption only works if you stay within the exemption. Once you exceed the exemption, there is no benefit. As a matter of fact, there's a punishment in the sense that you have to pay taxes on all of the money. My bill raises that amount to $2 million, and as it is so called, the penalty aspect of the exemption, once you exceed it, it's referred to as the cliff. It eliminates that cliff where you fall off with the next dollar and go back and pay on $1, so that there would not be any taxes due unless you had a taxable estate of more than $2 million. And again, you would begin to pay on $1 that exceeds $2 million, not $1 of your estate. In addition to the fact that this is a top priority of the Providence Chamber of Commerce and has been so endorsed by Lori White, my chosen profession is that of an attorney. And in order to keep up with the law as it changes, one of the things I do is I read the weekly newspaper called Rhode Island Lawyers Weekly and the monthly magazine called the Rhode Island Bar Journal. A few months ago in the Rhode Island Bar Journal, I read an article where it basically says, and they usually are articles by people who are specializing, people meaning attorneys that are specializing in a particular area of law. In this instance, it was estate lawyers, and they were discussing this very question, not from the perspective that you and I are discussing it now, but rather from the perspective of, well, if you're the lawyer sitting on the other side of the table and you're trying to give someone some estate tax advice, estate planning advice, what should you do? First thing, advise them to establish residency in another state that does not require or has a much more favorable or no estate tax at all. To me, that resonated in when I put on my state representative hat is they're telling me, in my capacity as a lawyer, to tell a prospective client to leave Rhode Island as a resident. I'll tell you, that made me mad. I don't want people to leave Rhode Island. One of the reasons I ran for public office and for this seat that I hold now was to keep my children in Rhode Island, to give them opportunities. But certainly, as a lawyer, it would seem kind of contraindicated to me to be able to say, well, I have an obligation to tell people to leave. How do you fix that? Well, I think you can fix it by this particular bill. To the extent that I've been able to kind of poll the attorneys that I know personally that do pretty much only this type of work, they've said to me, It would have an enormous impact. As a matter of fact, many of them are waiting for estate plans to be finalized, estate plans that lawyers prepare for people. They're waiting for the results of what the legislature does this year. Now, I have no ability, and matter of fact, I have every confidence that the fiscal staff here that is assigned to the House Finance Committee is accurate in predicting the impact, the loss of income, as to the raising of the exemption and the elimination of the cliff, so-called. What I have not been able to ascertain, but I can assure you, without having any particular knowledge of the actuary or mathematics that go into these revenue predictions, that if the person on the other side of the table from me that I'm giving advice decides not to establish residency in Florida on that 6 month and a day, that they'll stay in Rhode Island. If they do establish residency in Florida, then even though they may retain their house here and come back in the summer or come back for 181 days, if they do the latter, they won't have to pay Rhode Island income tax because they'll be a resident of Florida or some other state. Now, what is that number? And how does that add up? Because you only die once, but hopefully you die once, but hopefully you've engaged in estate planning 5, 10, in my case, God willing, 20 years before I expect to die. And during that period of time, each and every year, not that I would leave, but I would continue to pay Rhode Island income tax on the income that I make here in Rhode Island. In addition, and that again, this is part of the pebble effect, or the ripples. I'll still be here for, when I'm 75 and I decide that I want to go to Florida because my bones hurt or whatever, or I'm sick and tired of the winter, then I might be down there for 2 or 3 months. But if I'm being honest and I'm not staying there for 6 months and a day because I don't have to anymore, then I'm up here doing what? Buying groceries, buying gas, spending money in the form of taxable events. What is that amount of money calculated at? I cannot tell you, but I think anyone with logic would agree that it is an amount of money that one should deduct from the fiscal impact of this particular bill, because clearly it is an amount. The only question is how much, in fact, does it exceed the amount of loss by the capturing of revenues because we have effectively altered a behavior that otherwise would have been the advice of counsel for many Rhode Islanders that are in such a position. And lastly, I think it has an economic impact. And the economic impact is, and this is where I think the Providence Chamber of Commerce and certainly my discussions with Lori White have been, the people that make decisions on staying in Rhode Island and expanding a business, the CEOs, or those that are from other states that come here, they look at competitive factors. This is one of them that they look at. Now, how much of an impact does it play in each and every expansion of an existing business or coming to Rhode Island with a new business? I don't know, but it's on the list. And to eliminate it on the list of positive or versus negative factors can only help. It can certainly never hurt. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative.